Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it?
Glad to be here for this one. It's a big one.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Because picture this, right? You've just scored what looks like a really reasonably priced flight to a beautiful, historic twin island nation in the Eastern Caribbean.
Which happens a lot. People see that flight price and just click book.
Exactly. You pack your bags. You're picturing those classic, carefree island days. Maybe you're expecting to find a cute beachfront guest house for like $80.
Oh, the $80 beachfront dream.
Right, and you're thinking local rum punches are going to be pocket change. But then you land, the warm air hits you, and reality sets in hard.
Very hard.
The taxi to your hotel costs $65. Your mid-range room is suddenly pushing $300 a night. And when you wander into a local grocery store, just to save some cash, you find yourself staring at an $8 box of imported cereal.
Yeah, that sticker shock is real.
Today, we are auditing St. Kitts and Nevis for the 2026-27 season. And our entire mission in this deep dive is to dissect a very simple but very ruthless equation.
Money versus value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Money versus value. Because we're looking at resort nights running anywhere from $300 to well over $600.
And that's just the baseline.
Right. Even the mid-range is heavily squeezed. You're looking at $150 to $300. Flights from New York baseline around $525. And almost all the food you're going to eat is imported and priced accordingly.
It's definitely an expensive reality.
So if you're planning a trip and want the honest, is it worth it verdict before you book, follow the show on Spotify or Apple.
It is honestly a profound reality check for anyone stepping off that plane. And I think we need to be crystal clear right at the outset about who we are talking to here.
Let's do it. Who is this for?
If you are a couple seeking an incredibly calm, refined beach week, or a family that places an absolute premium on low-crime safety and easy logistics, St. Kitts and Nevis is a phenomenal top-tier option.
Okay, so safety and calm are the big selling points.
Yeah, and the appeal of having two distinct islands is real. You've got one that's a bit more bustling and one that's deeply secluded.
Right.
But, and this is a massive but, if you're a budget backpacker or a traveler hoping to party on a shoestring, this is going to be a punishing destination.
Punishing is the perfect word.
And weather dictates everything here, too. We're going to get into it. But your experience in the dry window, mid-December to April,
Yeah.
it is fundamentally different from rolling the dice between August and October, because that's when the hurricane season effectively shutters parts of the islands entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Right.
Because to me, looking at these numbers, it's kind of like walking into what you assume is a quirky local neighborhood thrift store, right?
I like this analogy.
Yeah, so you walk in, you expect a $5 t-shirt. But once you're inside, you look around and realize it's actually a highly curated, ultra-luxury vintage boutique. Yeah. You're staring at a $300 price tag for a t-shirt.
Exactly. You have to adjust your mindset entirely or you're going to leave angry.
You'll feel ripped off.
Totally. But we can't just throw these numbers at you, the listener, without explaining the mechanism behind it.
Right. Why is this happening? What is the economic engine driving the 2026-27 season to be such an expensive crossroads for these islands?
Well, the engine driving this isn't just post-pandemic inflation. It's not just general tourism trends. It is a highly specific government strategy.
And what is that?
It's known as the Citizenship by Investment Program, and it was significantly reshaped and tightened heading into 2026.
Wait, so we're talking about selling passports?
Essentially, yes. The government grants citizenship to foreign nationals in exchange for massive non-refundable economic contributions or massive real estate investments.
Wow. Okay.
But we really have to look at the ripple effect of that policy, because this isn't just bureaucratic red tape operating in the background.
It affects the tourist on the ground.
Completely. When a country allows high net worth individuals to buy into the country through real estate, the entire development market pivots.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. Imagine you are a property developer. Why would you ever build a 100-room budget hotel that requires constant upkeep and high turnover?
When you could just build luxury.
Exactly. You build 10 ultra-luxury villas, sell them to foreign investors seeking a second passport, and then have a management company rent them out to high-end tourists.
You wouldn't bother with the budget stuff. You follow the capital.
You follow the capital. The government is deliberately, unapologetically steering the islands toward a luxury, high-net-worth second home market.
And the casualty there is the budget traveler.
The immediate casualty. The bottom of the market hasn't just shrunk, it has effectively been raised. So when we talk about the cheapest guest houses on the island now running $80 to $150 a night, that is the floor.
The absolute floor. And honestly, just getting to that floor is a hurdle.
Mm.
The logistics of stepping foot on that newly gentrified real estate are complex.
Oh, yeah.
Because we are talking about a fly-in-only destination here. You are flying into Robert L. Bradshaw International Airport, which goes by the airport code SKB on St. Kitts.
Or the much smaller one on Nevis.
Right, Vance W. Amory International Airport. Now, I mentioned that $525 baseline round trip from New York.
Yeah.
But for most listeners flying out of the U.S. or the U.K., you aren't getting a direct flight.
No, you're not.
You are being routed through massive regional hubs, Miami, Charlotte, places like that.
And that routing mechanism is crucial to understand. You are taking up a seat on a major carrier to a hub, and then taking a smaller, lower capacity flight out to the islands.
Smaller planes mean higher prices.
Less capacity means the airlines can command a premium, especially during the winter travel months. It is a substantial financial investment just to clear immigration.
Which brings us to our first hard boundary for the listener, and this is a big one.
This is an absolute skip-if signal. Skip St. Kitts and Nevis entirely if your nightly accommodation budget hard caps at anything under $120 during the high season.
I actually want to push back on that a little,
Yeah.
or at least clarify it. Why 120? Because someone listening right now is definitely thinking, well, $120 is still a decent chunk of change. Surely I can find a bed and a fan for that.
You can find a bed, but you have to look at the geographical reality of what that money actually buys you.
Location, location, location.
Exactly. In that price bracket, your choices shrink to a handful of inland guest houses, mostly concentrated in or around the urban center of Basse-Terre, which is well away from the coast.
Ah,
And here's the mechanical trap that catches budget travelers. St. Kitts is a volcanic island. The best, most swimmable beaches are down on the southeast peninsula.
so you're nowhere near them.
Right. So you save money on your inland room, but then you wake up and realize you have to pay a taxi to take you to the beach, and then pay them again to bring you back.
Oh, wow. So the transport completely cannibalizes the room savings.
It eradicates it. You will end up spending resort-level money anyway, but instead of spending it on a beautiful beachfront balcony where you can hear the waves,
You're spending it from the back seat of a taxi.
in commuter traffic.
That is a brutal reality check. But, I mean, it's exactly the kind of due diligence we are here to do. So the reward of these islands is real, but you have to go in armed with resort-level capital, not backpacker math.
You really do.
Which naturally transitions us to the timeline. Let's say you've accepted the financial floor. Now you have to decide when to actually deploy that cash. When does the weather and the pricing actually align?
Timing is quite literally the axis on which this entire trip spins. Let's look at the meteorology first. The absolute best months to visit are mid-December through April.
The classic Caribbean high season.
Yes. This is the established dry season.
Hmm.
The mechanism here is the trade wind stabilizing, which brings warm days, significantly lower humidity, and minimal rainfall.
Sounds perfect.
But the most important factor for the specific geography, especially if you plan to take the ferry between the two islands or, spend days snorkeling, is that this window offers the calmest seas.
I see. But the travel industry isn't stupid. They know that's the premium weather window.
Oh, they absolutely know.
So they charge a premium price.
Of course they do. That meteorological reliability makes it the most punishing time for your wallet. It's the highest hotel rates, the most expensive flights, and crucially, it is the peak of the cruise ship season.
Which changes everything.
It dramatically alters the physical landscape of the islands. Conversely, the absolute worst months to book are August, September, and October.
Right, because that puts you squarely in the crosshairs of the Atlantic hurricane season.
Yes, and it's not just the risk of a direct hit from a named storm, which mathematically is statistically low, but catastrophic if it happens.
Sure.
It's the atmospheric conditions, the trade winds die down, the humidity skyrockets, you get these heavy, sustained tropical downpours.
Sounds miserable.
It is. And because the local economy knows the tourists aren't coming, a vast number of smaller businesses, independent restaurants, and even some boutique hotels either drastically reduce their hours or they just board up and close entirely for reservations.
So you've painted two extreme pictures here. We have the expensive, crowded, perfect weather window on one side, and the stormy, sweaty, closed-down ghost town on the other.
Right.
For the listener trying to thread the needle, where is the value sweet spot?
The strategic sweet spot lies in the shoulder seasons, We are talking about late April through early June and then a brief window in November.
Okay, so right before and right after the extremes.
Exactly. The weather patterns during these weeks are still largely favorable. You might get an isolated afternoon shower, but nothing trip-ruining. Crucially, the pricing algorithms for the major hotels soften noticeably, and the massive cruise ships are much less frequent.
Let's talk about those pricing algorithms for a second, because the volatility is staggering.
It is wild volatility. I mean, a standard room at a mid-range property that you might secure for $150 a night in the third week of May. That can easily rocket to $250, $300 or more over the Christmas and New Year stretch.
Double the price, easily.
Easily. And availability during that late December to February peak becomes a massive issue.
Why is availability so tight then? Is it just like snowbirds fleeing the cold?
It's snowbirds, yes, but it is heavily compounded by local cultural events. St. Kitts hosts its national carnival, which is known locally as Sugar Mass, and that runs from mid-December into early January.
And this isn't just a small parade, right?
This is not a small parade. It is a massive cultural homecoming.
Paint a picture of Sugar Mass for us. What does that actually look like on the ground if you're there?
It is an explosion. You've got calypso, soca music, and these massive street parades called road marches. You have thousands of people in vibrant feathered costumes dancing through the streets of Basse-Terre.
That sounds incredible.
It is arguably the best time to experience the soul of the island. But it also means the Kittitian diaspora from the U.S., the U.K., and Canada, they all fly home.
Oh, so they're taking up the hotel rooms.
They book out the flights, they book out the rental cars, and they fill the guest houses. If you want to go during Sugar Mass, you are competing against an entire diaspora for a very limited number of beds.
Man, that's tough. You know, what's fascinating to me isn't just the sheer volume of tourists during these peak times, but how those crowds actually behave. I was looking at some of the movement data from our sources, and it's not what you'd expect.
No, it's not.
It isn't a constant, overwhelming hum of people covering every square inch of the island.
What's fascinating here is that the crowd mechanics are almost entirely tidal. And the moon pulling that tide is Port Zante in Basse-Terre.
Okay, let's use a metaphor here. It's essentially like a massive sports stadium emptying out after a concert, right?
Yes.
The infrastructure is built to handle thousands of people, but only for a very specific, concentrated window of time.
That is the perfect analogy. When a mega cruise ship, or sometimes 2 or 3 at once, docks at Port Zante, they disgorge thousands of passengers simultaneously.
All at once.
All at once. So at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday, you can walk into Basse-Terre to see the Berkeley Memorial and the circus, or stroll through Independence Square, and it is absolute chaos. Taxis are everywhere. Vendors are out in force.
Peak hour.
Yes. If you head to the St. Kitts Scenic Railway or up to Brimstone Hill Fortress, you are moving shoulder to shoulder with tour groups. If you drive down to the Southeast Peninsula beaches like South Friars or Cockleshell Bay, every single lounger is occupied.
But then the concert ends.
Exactly. The cruise ships operate on ruthless schedules. The passengers have to be back on board by late afternoon, so the tide goes out.
The tide goes out. I love that.
By 5 p.m., the exact same beach that was standing room only at noon is suddenly entirely deserted. The beach bars quiet down, the tour buses vanish, and you have this pristine environment all to yourself.
So if I'm a listener planning an independent itinerary, I don't necessarily have to avoid the island entirely during cruise season. I just have to operate on a counter schedule.
Precisely. You just do the opposite of what the ships do. And honestly, this tidal dynamic is mostly confined to St. Kitts. Nevis is a completely different logistical reality.
How so?
Nevis does not have a deepwater port capable of docking those megaships. They get smaller luxury cruisers, but the volume is a fraction of what St. Kitts sees. So places like Penny's Beach or the colonial streets of Charlestown on Nevis remain exceptionally quiet year-round. They just don't experience that tidal surge.
Okay, so let's synthesize this for the listener's actual planning. The strategy depends entirely on what kind of traveler you are.
Very much so.
If you are coming specifically to dive the wrecks or snorkel, you are locked into that expensive December to April window. You simply have to have that clear water and those calm trade winds for the boats to operate safely.
Correct. But let's look at the active traveler. Say your main objective is to hire a guide and hike up Nevis Peak.
Which is intense, right?
Yeah. It is a serious, muddy, vertical scramble up a dormant volcano. You must avoid the wettest months late in the year. The mechanism of that hike relies on grabbing roots and pulling yourself up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In the wet season, those trails turn into slick, dangerous mudslides. it becomes a major hazard. And even if you make it to the summit, the cloud cover completely obliterates the view you worked so hard to see.
That sounds like a nightmare. And what if the listener is just there to lie on the sand with a book?
Beachgoers hold all the cards. You have the flexibility to risk the shoulder season. A passing afternoon tropical shower in late May isn't going to ruin your trip. You take cover at a beach bar, order a drink, and 20 minutes later, the sun is back out.
Nice. Let's lock down the booking windows then. If someone is targeting that peak dry season trip, what is the timeline? When do they need to hit purchase?
You must lock in flights and hotels 3 to 5 months out, minimum. The total airlift, the actual number of commercial seats flying into SKB on any given week, is strictly limited.
So there just aren't that many seats available.
Right. The airlines know this, so the algorithms push prices up relentlessly as you get closer to the date. It peaks around U.S. spring break. And remember, we mentioned Sugar Mass on St. Kitts, but Nevis has its own cultural micro-peak.
What's that?
It's called Culturama, which takes place in late July and early August. It celebrates the emancipation of slaves, and it brings a huge surge of domestic and regional travel specifically to Nevis.
Okay, so the bottom line on timing. Never book a non-refundable trip in September hoping you can outsmart a hurricane.
Never.
And never assume a famous beach will be quiet at noon on a Tuesday without checking the port schedule first. Plan your St. Kitts beach days for the late afternoon. Utilize the shoulder seasons, if you're watching your wallet, and map your dates against the local festivals.
Good summary.
Now, let's look at the physical reality of getting there. You've booked the flight, you've accepted the cost. Picture stepping off the plane onto the tarmac at SKB. What is the immediate first impression?
The first impression is usually relief.
Really? Why relief?
Because Robert L. Bradshaw is a small, single-runway, highly manageable airport. Unlike navigating the overwhelming, labyrinthine corridors of a mega hub like Miami or Cancun, landing in St. Kitts feels immediately intimate.
Okay, that's refreshing.
It is. You often step right out of the aircraft onto the tarmac, and that warm, humid, salt-tinged air hits you instantly. It's a very low-stress environment. Unless you happen to land at the exact moment 3 other international flights touch down, which creates a brief bottleneck, the immigration lines are generally very efficient.
It sounds idyllic.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
But the moment you walk out of the sliding glass doors with your suitcase, you hit your first real logistical friction point. Transport.
Yes, the transport friction.
Because you can't just hop on a sleek airport train. And the local public buses, which are cheap, do not route directly through the airport terminal. You are getting into a taxi.
And this is where the financial meter starts ticking. The taxi system operates on heavily regulated fixed rates that are set by zones.
So no haggling.
No haggling. You don't have to worry about a driver running up a meter in traffic, which is nice. But the baseline costs are high. You should expect to hand over roughly $15 just for the short hop into downtown Basse-Terre.
Okay, 15 isn't terrible.
But if you are heading out to the popular Frigate Bay Resort Strip, that is going to be around $25. And if you have booked a luxury property all the way out on the far southeast peninsula, like the Park Hyatt, you are looking at a $65 one-way fare before you've even checked into your room.
Wow. And I see a glaring issue here for anyone flying out of the U.S. East Coast. A lot of those connections through Miami or Charlotte get delayed.
You do.
So what happens if you land late? Is there a penalty?
There is a massive penalty. A 50% surcharge automatically applies to all taxi fares after 10 p.m. Furthermore, drivers can and do charge extra fees for particularly heavy or oversized luggage.
So let's do the math on that. If your flight is delayed out of Miami, you land at 10:30 p.m., you have 2 big suitcases, and you are staying out on the peninsula. That $65 ride suddenly becomes a $100+ expense in the dark.
Exactly. That late-night transfer to the peninsula will likely be the single most expensive car ride of your entire vacation.
That's rough. Let's complicate this further. What if your hotel isn't even on St. Kitts? You mentioned Nevis is the quieter sister island, and a lot of the best boutique properties are over there.
They are.
How does the listener physically traverse from an international arrival on St. Kitts to a hotel bed on Nevis?
That transforms your arrival from a simple taxi ride into a multi-stage logistical operation.
Oh boy. Walk me through it.
Okay, first, you land at SKB and clear customs. Then you wrangle your luggage into a taxi. You take that taxi into Basse-Terre to the primary ferry terminal or to one of the smaller water taxi piers like Reggae Beach. You unload your bags, you buy a ticket, you carry your bags onto a boat.
Still going.
You physically cross the 2-mile channel of water known as the Narrows. You dock in Charlestown on Nevis. You carry your bags off the boat, load them into a second taxi, and finally drive to your hotel.
I am exhausted just listening to that sequence.
Yeah.
And let me guess, the boat isn't free.
The passenger ferry itself is actually one of the few genuine bargains left. It only costs about $11 to $13 one way.
Okay, that's not bad.
But the mechanism of payment is critical. It is strictly a cash-only transaction. You cannot tap your Apple Pay to get on that boat. But the real cost of this transfer isn't the $13.
What is it then?
It's the toll it takes on your time and energy. If your flight lands at 4 p.m., by the time you clear customs, get a taxi, wait for the next scheduled ferry, cross the channel and take another taxi, the sun has set. You spend a half day just transiting.
Which establishes a crucial baseline for the listener's itinerary. St. Kitts offers a seamless one-step arrival. Nevis demands a toll in patience, coordination, and transit time.
Perfectly said.
But once you survive that arrival sequence, you finally reach your accommodation. And how you get there is entirely dictated by where you sleep, which brings us to the core of this deep dive.
Yeah.
The 4 traveler tiers.
Let's get into the tiers.
We teased the first one earlier, but let's really put it under the microscope. Tier 1, the backpacker and budget tier, ranging from $80 to $150 a night.
As our audit clearly shows, this is the weakest, most compromised tier on the islands. If you are operating in this bracket, your options are severely constrained. You are looking at small, very basic guest houses or inland apartments.
Right.
And the geographical reality is that they're almost entirely located within the urban grid of Basse-Terre or tucked into residential neighborhoods inland. They are not on the beach.
I want to challenge this tier entirely, actually. We were calling it the backpacker tier, but $150 a night is over $1,000 a week just for a bed.
It is.
In Southeast Asia or Central America, a backpacker budget is $30 a day total. At $150 a night, aren't we just admitting that the traditional shoestring backpacker shouldn't come here at all?
That is exactly what we are admitting. The true traditional backpacker infrastructure, you know, the $20 a night bunk in a massive social dorm room with a communal kitchen, it is virtually non-existent on St. Kitts and Nevis. The economics of the island do not support it. So the person utilizing this $80 to $150 tier is usually a very specific type of independent traveler.
Right. It's someone who is fiercely independent. Someone who is perfectly comfortable standing on the side of a busy local road flagging down a shared minibus, and who doesn't mind the fact that their home base looks out over a street rather than a coral reef.
Yes.
But again, the trade-off is daily transport. You save on the nightly rate, but you bleed cash every day trying to get to the Southeast Peninsula beaches, where the actual beauty of the island is located.
Let's move up to Tier 2, the mid-range couple. Here we are looking at a nightly commitment of $150 to $300.
This feels like the battleground tier. This is where most of our listeners are probably trying to operate. They want comfort, maybe a pool, air conditioning, but they cannot stomach a $600 a night luxury bill. Where are they actually sleeping?
On St. Kitts, this budget places you squarely in the Frigate Bay area. This is a very developed strip that acts as the waistline of the island right before the peninsula stretches out. It offers mid-tier hotels, condominium rentals, and relatively easy, shorter taxi rides to the premium beaches at South Friars.
Okay, and on Nevis?
On Nevis, this tier is where the island really shines. It opens up access to some beautifully restored, historic plantation-style inns tucked into the hillsides, as well as some very solid mid-range beach properties up and down Penny's Beach.
It sounds ideal, but what is the structural compromise? There's always a trade-off.
The trade-off on St. Kitts is noise versus convenience. Frigate Bay is undeniably convenient, but it is located immediately adjacent to the strip.
Describe the strip.
It is a densely packed row of lively, open-air beach bars and clubs that pump out soca, reggae, and dancehall music late into the night. It is fantastic if you want to party.
Oh, I see.
But if you book a mid-range room near the strip and you are a light sleeper expecting the sound of gentle waves, that acoustic reality is going to be a massive problem.
Right. Yeah.
Now, if you choose to avoid Frigate Bay and find a quieter mid-range spot elsewhere on the island, you instantly reintroduce the transport problem. You are back to relying on expensive taxis to get to the restaurants.
Let's scale up to Tier 3, the family. We're budgeting roughly $250 to $500 a night for a larger family room, maybe a suite or adjoining rooms. That pushes us out of the boutique guest houses and into the larger resort footprints.
It does. And the anchor property for this demographic on St. Kitts is the St. Kitts Marriott Resort, also located in the broader Frigate Bay area. When a family operates in this tier, they are paying for a contained convenience.
What does that look like?
A massive property like that has multiple swimming pools, a variety of on-site restaurants, a golf course, and even a casino.
It's the cruise ship model, but on land. You never actually have to leave.
Precisely. And for parents managing young children, that reduction in daily logistical friction is worth paying a premium for. You don't have to wrangle kids into a hot taxi just to find breakfast.
But the trade-off here is the silent accumulation of hidden costs.
This is where families get destroyed financially. When you stay within the ecosystem of a massive resort, you are a captive audience. The on-property dining prices are inflated.
Naturally.
Furthermore, the nightly rate you see online rarely includes the mandatory daily resort fees, which cover things like towel service and Wi-Fi. And it definitely doesn't include the hefty government taxes.
Oh.
And here is the picker. The beach directly in front of the Marriott on the Atlantic side is often subject to sargassum seaweed and rougher surf. If the family wants those pristine, calm Caribbean waters, they still have to hire a taxi to take them down to the peninsula beaches.
So you're paying all that money and you still might need a taxi for a good beach day. And finally, Tier 4, luxury and comfort. The sky is the limit, but we are baselining at $300 to $600. And we both know that in peak season, those rates blow past $1,000 a night.
Oh, easily.
We are talking about the flagship properties, the Park Hyatt St. Kitts at Banana Bay, and the Four Seasons Resort Nevis down on Penny's Beach.
These properties define the ultra-luxury tier. They cater to the traveler who prioritizes flawless, anticipatory service, total aesthetic perfection, and direct, uncrowded beachfront access above all else.
But the paradox of luxury here is that the trade-off for all that seclusion is total isolation.
It is complete geographic isolation. The Park Hyatt is visually stunning, looking right across the water at Nevis. But to achieve that level of seclusion, it was built at the very end of the Southeast Peninsula.
Which is pretty far out.
It is miles and miles away from the independent restaurants, historical sites, and local culture of Best-Air.
Which is a deliberate architectural choice, isn't it? It's designed to keep you on the property.
It is a captive audience model taken to the extreme because you are so far out, the friction of taking a $65 taxi back into town for dinner becomes too high.
So you just need there.
So you end up eating at the resort's restaurants every single night, where you are paying absolute premium New York or London level prices for every single plate. The only way to break that captive cycle is to rent a car, which adds yet another expense.
And I want to hammer this point home for every single listener. Regardless of which of those 4 tiers you land in, you have to read the fine print.
You must. Every single hotel bill is going to be hit with a mandatory 10 to 15% government tax and service charge. If you budget $300 a night based on the bold print on Expedia, you are going to be in for a nasty shock when you actually check out and see the final tally.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because once you have secured the room and paid the taxes and navigated the taxis, you eventually have to eat. And the culinary economics of St. Kitts and Nevis provide a profound shock to the system for a lot of first-time visitors.
Yes, they do.
We have to dive deep into the import reality.
The import reality is the defining, inescapable feature of the local economy. You have to understand the mechanics of island supply chains.
Right.
Aside from some locally grown root vegetables, seasonal fruits like mangoes, and the fresh fish pulled directly out of the surrounding ocean, practically every single caloric item you consume has to be brought in on a boat.
Let's trace that supply chain. Because it explains why you, the listener, are paying so much.
Imagine a box of breakfast cereal. That box is manufactured in the United States. It is put on a truck, driven to a port in Miami, and loaded into a shipping container.
Okay, so far, so normal.
That container goes onto a maritime freighter. That freighter doesn't just sail straight to St. Kitts. It likely stops in Puerto Rico, maybe Antigua, paying docking fees and burning marine fuel the entire way.
The costs are adding up.
Finally, it reaches Port Zante. It gets unloaded by unionized dock workers, gets hit with import tariffs by the Kittitian government, gets loaded onto another local truck, and finally placed on the shelf at Rams Trading or the Best Buy supermarket.
Every single person who touched that box of cereal took a margin.
Exactly. The logistics of getting physical goods to an island with a population of just around 50,000 people lack any meaningful economies of scale, and those compounded costs are passed directly, 100%, to you, the consumer.
So let's look at the actual grocery prices for the listener who thinks they can outsmart the system by self-catering. If I walk into a supermarket in Basse Terre or Charlestown, what am I paying?
You are paying prices that rival or exceed major U.S. coastal cities. A simple 1-liter bottle of drinking water will cost you between $1.50 and $2.50.
Just for water.
A standard, unremarkable loaf of sandwich bread is $3 to $4. A dozen eggs will run you roughly $4 to $6.
I'm looking at these grocery numbers, and I have to be honest, I'm struggling to see the value proposition for the self-caterer. If I'm paying New York City bodega prices for a loaf of bread and eggs in Basse Terre, the budget strategy of cooking my own meals is effectively a myth, isn't it?
It is a myth if you are trying to replicate your diet from home. If you insist on buying imported luxury items, European cheeses, American brand name snacks, frozen pizzas, it will devastate your budget.
You're just paying for all that shipping.
Exactly. The only way self-catering works is if you adapt entirely to the local supply. You buy local bananas, local squash, and you go down to the public markets to buy fish directly from the people who caught it.
What about the local beer? That's usually a safe haven for budgets.
It is. A bottle of the local Carib or Skull beer, bought from a small shop or a local corner bar, is a very reasonable $1.50 to $2.50. It's brewed locally, so it bypasses that entire ocean freight supply chain we just discussed.
By the way, we should address a basic biological need. Is the tap water safe to drink?
From a strictly public health perspective, yes. The municipal tap water is treated, and there are no major systemic food or water safety concerns for tourists. However, the mineral content and the taste from the desalinization and treatment process mean that the vast majority of visitors, and many locals, prefer to buy bottled water for drinking, which again adds a small but constant drip to your daily spend.
So that's the grocery store reality. What happens when we sit down at a restaurant? If I just want a casual, authentic, local plate for lunch, maybe some stewed chicken, amount of rice and peas, and some saltfish, what is the damage?
That is where you find the most authentic culinary experience and the best value. A heavy, filling local plate from a spot in Basse Terre or a roadside stand will run you about $8 to $15.
That's completely reasonable.
But the pricing curve steepens aggressively the moment you want table service. If you sit down at a standard mid-range restaurant for dinner, you are looking at $18 to $30 just for the main course.
And if I'm dining at one of the luxury resorts or a premium spot right on the sand?
You are looking at $35 to $60 or more for a single dinner entree. And that does not include drinks, appetizers, or the tip.
Wow. We have to talk about the famous beach bars. This is the quintessential Caribbean fantasy. Places like the Shipwreck Beach Bar down at South Friars, or Reggae Beach Bar at Cockleshell Bay. What does it cost to sit on a wooden stool, look across the water at Nevis, and drink rum?
They are iconic institutions for a very good reason. The atmosphere is unbeatable. But they're businesses. If you order a plate of grilled mahi-mahi or ribs and pair it with a local rum punch, that cocktail is going to cost about $6 to $10.
Okay, that's standard for a resort area.
Even a simple cafe coffee at these spots hovers around $3 to $5.
We need to urgently clarify the currency situation here, because doing exchange rate math in your head after 3 $10 rum punches in the hot sun is a recipe for disaster.
It absolutely is. The official local currency is the East Caribbean dollar, usually abbreviated as EC or XCD.
And how does that relate to the US dollar? Does it float?
No, it does not float. The mechanism here is a hard peg. The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank has pegged the EC to the US dollar at a fixed rate of roughly 2.7 EC to 1 US dollar. It has been pegged there for decades.
So if you see a rum punch priced at 20 EC on a chalkboard menu, you just divide by 2.7, which translates to about $7.40 US.
Exactly.
So if I'm an American listener, do I need to run to a currency exchange before my flight and get a massive stack of EC notes?
Not necessarily. US dollars are essentially universally accepted across both islands. However, the mechanism of change is where people get confused.
Let me guess. You don't get US dollars back.
Right. If you hand a bartender a $20 US bill for a $5 US drink, you are very likely going to receive your $15 of change in East Caribbean dollars.
So you inevitably end up with a mixed wallet. Are there times when I absolutely must have the local EC cash?
Yes. You must have small denominations of EC cash if you plan to use the local public minibuses, if you are paying the departure tax at the ferry terminal, if you are buying a handful of fruit at the public market, and for leaving small tips for housekeeping or bellhops.
Speaking of tipping, what is the cultural expectation here?
Mm.
Because that varies wildly across the Caribbean.
The golden rule in St. Kitts and Nevis is to always scrutinize your bill first.
Why?
Because of the British and European influence, a 10 to 15% service charge is very frequently added automatically to restaurant and hotel bills. If that service charge is printed on the receipt, the tip is already paid. You do not need to add more unless the service was truly life-changing.
Good to know.
But if the bill arrives and there is no service charge listed, a 10 to 15% cash tip is the standard polite expectation.
All right. We have meticulously covered the mechanics of flights, hotels, taxi zones, supply chains, and rum punch. Now, I want to deliver on the promise of this deep dive.
A number.
Yes, I want to give the listener the absolute bottom line, real-world daily budget numbers so they can look at their bank account and do their own travel due diligence. Let's run through these tiers again, but this time, frame it around the listener's actual decision-making process using hard, all-in daily U.S. dollar estimates. Let's start with the backpacker.
If you are determined to attempt the backpacker strategy, your realistic daily burn rate is going to sit roughly between $110 and $160 a day.
Let's break that down.
You are spending $80 to $150 just for the bed. If you are solo, you eat that whole cost. If you have a partner, you can split it.
Okay, what else?
You need to allocate $20 to $30 a day for a mix of self-catered groceries and one cheap local chicken plate. You must budget $10 to $20 purely for local buses and shared taxis to get to the beach. And that leaves you maybe $10 to $20 for a single entry fee to a historical site or a couple of beers at sunset.
I'm going to say it again. $160 daily budget is over $1,100 a week for a single person sleeping in a basic inland room. That is a terrible value proposition for someone looking for a dirt cheap escape. The overrun risk here is massive, isn't it?
The overrun risk for the budget traveler is catastrophic. The moment you get tired of waiting in the heat for a crowded public minibus and decide to just hire a private taxi to take you to Cockleshell Bay, your entire daily budget is obliterated.
Gone.
The moment you decide to take the ferry to Nevis for a day trip, buy lunch, and take a taxi to Penny's Beach, you've spent $80 before you've even had a drink. The infrastructure actively works against the budget traveler.
Let's look at the listener trying to pull off a romantic week without taking out a second mortgage. The mid-range couple. What does their Wednesday actually cost from breakfast to bedtime?
For the couple, total, you need to budget $450 to $600 a day. That means you are looking at $200 to $320 per person per day.
Let's dissect that. Where is the money going?
It covers your shared mid-range room at $75 to $150 per person. It allocates $50 to $70 per person for food, meaning a light breakfast, a casual lunch, and one proper sit-down dinner.
What about getting around?
It sets aside $25 to $45 a day for a round-trip taxi ride, and it averages out about $30 to $60 a day for an activity, like renting loungers on the beach, doing a guided rainforest hike, or visiting a museum.
And where does this couple accidentally blow their budget?
The beachfront cocktails. It is a psychological trap. You are sitting on a lounger, the water is perfectly blue, the reggae is playing, and a waiter asks if you want another $10 rum punch.
Hard to say no to that.
You say yes. You say yes 3 times. Over a week, those casual drinks add hundreds of dollars to the final tally.
Now, tier 3, the family of 4, mom, dad, 2 kids. What is the financial reality of taking the family to St. Kitts?
The financial reality is a daily burn rate of $400 to $700. If we extrapolate that out, for a standard one-week trip, a family is spending roughly $3,000 to $5,000 strictly on the ground.
Wait, on the ground? That does not include the flights.
That does not include the $2,000 plus it costs to fly everyone there.
Break down that daily $700. How do you spend that much in a day?
You have a family room or suite running $250 to $500. Feeding 4 people, even with kids' menus, is going to command $80 to $150 a day minimum. Getting 4 people into a taxi requires a larger van, so transport runs $40 to $70. And paying entry fees or excursion costs for 4 people easily eats up $60 to $150 a day.
And where do families hemorrhage cash?
Taxes and taxes. Resort taxes catch parents completely off guard at checkout, and the constant friction of paying $40 every single time they want to leave the resort property to find a cheaper dinner off-site eventually breaks their spirit.
So they just stay in the resort.
Exactly. They surrender and just pay the inflated resort restaurant prices out of sheer exhaustion.
Tier 4, the luxury traveler, what are they spending?
At this tier, the budget becomes theoretical, but a baseline is $700 to $1,500 daily, and often well beyond that.
Well beyond.
You are dropping $500 to $900 plus just to unlock the door to the room. You are spending $150 to $300 a day on premium dining and imported wines. You are paying $60 to $120 for private transfers or a luxury car rental, and dropping $150 to $400 on a whim for a hot stone massage or a private catamaran charter.
Finally, we have to look at the new reality of travel. What about a digital nomad? Someone who wants to rent an Airbnb, open their laptop, and stay for a month.
A realistic monthly budget for a digital nomad sits between $2,800 and $4,500. A decent one-bedroom apartment rental will be $1,200 to $2,200.
And living costs.
Groceries and eating out will run $600 to $900. Transport is $250 to $450, and data and utilities add another $100 to $200.
So what does this all mean? It means St. Kitts is not a cheap nomad hub like Medellin or Bali. To find any value here, a nomad has to eat exactly like a local, master the public bus system, and secure a long-term rental specifically in the shoulder season when demand plummets.
Absolutely, those budgets are tightly wound, and it is abundantly clear that the logistics of this island can completely blow them up if you aren't paying attention.
Which is exactly what we need to prevent. You've identified 3 distinct, named logistics traps that listeners need to be hyper-aware of. Let's start with Trap 1.
Trap 1 is what I call the peninsula transfer trap. We've touched on the geography, but we need to understand how it weaponizes your budget. The absolute best beaches, Cockleshell, Banana Mace, South Friars, and the flagship luxury hotel, the Park Hyatt, are located on a long, winding, dramatic peninsula that juts out from the main body of St. Kitts toward Nevis.
It looks beautiful on a map, but the lived reality is that your wallet is bleeding every time you move.
Precisely. It is physically isolated. We established the $65 one-way fare from the airport. If you are staying at the Park Hyatt and you want to visit a different beach on the peninsula, it's $25 to $28 each way.
Good grief.
If you decide you want to have dinner in the historic center of Bastere, you're paying a massive taxi fare to get there. And if you linger over dessert and stay past 10 p.m., that 50% night surcharge kicks in for the ride back.
So if a couple stays on the peninsula but refuses to eat at the hotel every night, transfers alone will easily add $100 to $250 to their weekly budget, just in friction costs. Who does this trap catch, and what is the definitive fix?
It catches luxury travelers who assume taxis will be cheap, and it catches anyone with a late-night flight arrival. The fix is absolute. If you are staying on the Southeast Peninsula for more than 2 nights, you must rent a car.
Just rent a car.
Yes. The daily rental rate will quickly pay for itself in saved taxi fares, and it gives you the freedom to escape the captive pricing of the resort.
Okay, Trap 1 fix. Rent a car if you stay south. What is Trap 2?
Trap 2 is the Nevis ferry and timing trap. The mechanism here relies on the nature of the channel crossing itself. The primary passenger ferry between Bastere and Charlestown operates on a roughly hourly schedule, but it only runs from about 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.
That's a pretty limited window.
It is heavily dependent on the weather and the mood of the sea. And, as we stressed earlier, they only accept EC cash, plus a mandatory $1 EC departure fee that you have to pay at the terminal.
Let's talk about the psychological and financial reality of getting caught in this trap.
The lived reality is a traveler who is basing their vacation on Nevis. They decide to take a day trip over to St. Kitts. They have a wonderful long day exploring Brimstone Hill, taking the railway, maybe having a few drinks on the strip.
But having a great time.
They lose track of time, stroll up to the Bastere ferry terminal at 6:05 p.m. and find the gates locked. The last useful scheduled ferry has left.
And what are their options at that point?
Their options are terrible. Late-night public options are virtually non-existent. You are suddenly facing the prospect of trying to track down a private water taxi captain, negotiating a charter in the dark, which will cost upwards of $60 to $100,
Right.
Or you are literally stranded on the wrong island and have to buy a hotel room for the night.
And this also applies to the most critical day of the trip, departure day.
Yes. If you are sleeping on Nevis, but your international flight departs from SKB on St. Kitts at 2 p.m., you are relying on a boat to make your flight. If the sea is rough and the morning ferries are canceled, you miss your international flight.
The time penalty and the stress penalty of missing that boat is immense. So the fix.
Always carry EC cash and small bills. Meticulously verify the exact time of the final crossing for that specific day because schedules change. And if you are flying out of St. Kitts, skip a tight same-day Nevis to flight plan entirely. Cross over to St. Kitts the day before your flight and spend your final night near the airport.
Excellent advice. Let's look at trap 3.
Trap 3 is the cruise tide crowd trap. We discuss the mechanism, Port Zante, and the megaships. When two ships dock, they can offload upwards of 5,000 to 8,000 passengers onto an island with a baseline population of roughly 40,000.
It completely overwhelms the infrastructure for a concentrated 6-hour window.
It really does.
So you could arrive at South Friars Bay at noon, ready for a relaxing day of swimming, and find absolute chaotic gridlock.
Yes. The beach bars are slammed, the bartenders are overwhelmed, every single lounger is rented out. You might even face surge-priced taxi fares or walk-up excursion rates because demand is massively outstripping supply.
So you're paying more to have a worse time.
Exactly. This trap heavily impacts independent, land-based travelers who naively try to do walk-up beach days on heavy ship days.
The fix here seems entirely reliant on research.
It is. You must go online and check the Port Zante cruise schedule for your specific dates before you make any daily plans. You structure your entire week around that schedule.
Just build your trip around the boats.
You do your town exploring, your shopping in Basse-Terre, and your prime beach visits on days with zero or very light ship traffic. If you absolutely must go to the peninsula on a heavy ship day, you wait until 4:30 p.m. when the cruisers are recalled to their ships.
Okay, shifting focus entirely. We've talked deeply about money, crowds, and logistics. But there's a massive underlying question when we look at the economic reality of this island.
Yeah.
You have a government pushing for ultra-wealthy investors. You have private, walled-off luxury resorts charging $1,000 a night. And these exist right alongside local communities, where the baseline wages are battling against the heavily imported inflation of groceries and goods.
Yes, that's the reality.
Historically, in the Caribbean, that kind of extreme economic friction creates a security issue. So what does this all mean for your safety as a tourist walking around?
It's a critical question. The honest risk picture is that St. Kitts and Nevis, despite that economic friction, remains broadly calm and safe for tourists. The vast, overwhelming majority of visits pass without a single negative incident.
That's reassuring.
But it is not a sterile theme park where you can switch off your street sense entirely. We can break the actual risks down into a strict hierarchy.
What's at the top of that risk hierarchy?
Number 1 is opportunistic theft. This is a direct result of the wealth disparity you mentioned. If you leave a $1,000 iPhone sitting unattended on a beach towel while you swim for an hour, or if you leave a rental car unlocked with a backpack visible in the back seat, it might not be there when you return.
Basic common sense. And the second tier of risk?
The second tier involves isolated areas. Walking alone in unlit, non-tourist residential places at night, or venturing onto completely deserted beaches after dark. The third tier, which gets the most sensational headlines, is local violent crime.
Right.
It exists, and the island does have a homicide rate that fluctuates, but we have to be analytical about this. Those incidents are almost exclusively tied to local targeted disputes in specific non-tourist neighborhoods. They very rarely involve or impact a visitor.
So the standard urban travel advice applies. Exercise normal caution, don't flash excessive jewelry or cash, and avoid dark, empty streets. How does this landscape feel specifically for solo travelers and families?
Solo female travelers report feeling generally very comfortable, particularly within the resort bubbles around the populated areas of Frigate Bay and especially on Nevis.
Nevis feels safer.
Nevis, because of its smaller scale and slower pace, really reads as a very low-key, relaxed, and safe environment for solo travel. Families also find a high level of comfort here. The islands are small, the pace is gentle, and basic routine medical care like getting stitches or treating a minor infection is readily accessible at the hospitals in Basse-Terre and Charlestown.
Though we should note, serious medical emergencies are a totally different, much more frightening story, right?
Yes, that is a point we cannot gloss over. While routine issues are handled locally, the medical infrastructure is limited. Serious, life-threatening emergencies, severe trauma from a car accident, or complex cardiac events will almost certainly require a specialized medical evacuation off-island. usually to Puerto Rico or Miami.
And a private medevac jet is not cheap.
It can cost tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket. Therefore, comprehensive travel insurance that specifically includes high-limit medical evacuation coverage is absolutely essential. It is not optional, especially if you are planning to engage in higher-risk activities like diving the wrecks or scrambling up Nevis Peak.
Any other practical safety advice listeners need before they hit book?
We mentioned taxi overcharging. Fares are supposed to be fixed by zone, but misunderstandings happen. Always explicitly agree on the exact price and whether it is in US or EC dollars before you put your luggage in the trunk.
Good tip.
If you rent a car, remember the legacy of British rule. Driving is on the left side of the road. Many of the local roads, particularly the one winding over Timothy Hill to the peninsula, are quite narrow, steep, and winding with blind corners. Drive defensively.
And nightlife.
Regarding nightlife, the Strip at Frigate Bay is a fantastic time, but employ the usual common sense regarding pacing your drinks and prearranging a safe taxi ride home.
All right, we have subjected the listener to a gauntlet of warnings, budgets, and logistics traps. Let's talk about the payoff. The moments that make the money, the planning, and the flights actually worth it. What are the undeniable soaring highlights of this destination?
The St. Kitts Scenic Railway is a massive, unique highlight. The mechanism of this is fascinating. St. Kitts was dominated by the sugarcane industry for centuries. When the industry finally collapsed, instead of letting the infrastructure rot, they repurposed the narrow-gauge railway tracks that used to haul cane.
Oh, that's clever.
Now it's a roughly 3-hour narrated loop around the island. You sit in double-decker cars, you are served unlimited drinks, and a cappella choir sings local folk songs, and you get incredible elevated coastal and mountain views that you simply cannot see from the road.
That sounds amazing.
Even at a steep price of $120 to $160 per person, most riders rate it as a pinnacle experience.
It's totally unique. You don't find that kind of rail infrastructure on most Caribbean islands.
Yeah.
What else justifies the trip?
Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park. From a historical and architectural standpoint, it is staggering. It is a massive, heavily fortified citadel built by the labor of enslaved Africans for the British military, perched high on a volcanic cone.
It sounds imposing.
It is. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and for a very reasonable $10 to $12 entry fee, it delivers profound, sobering history. But visually, it offers sweeping, panoramic views out over the Caribbean Sea toward neighboring islands like St. Eustatius. It's excellent value.
And the beaches. We complained about the transport to get there, but are they worth it?
The Southeast Peninsula beaches are stunning. South Friars, Cockleshell, sitting at a place like Reggae Beach Bar with the green volcanic cone of Nevis rising majestically across the Narrows right in front of you. That is the visual and social peak of the trip for most people.
And on the Nevis side?
Penny's Beach is a miles-long stretch of stunning, serene coastline. The volcanic hot springs near Charlestown are a unique rustic draw. The historic plantation inns, like the Hermitage or Montpelier, offer a complete, refined change of pace from the mega resorts.
And for the active folks?
For the intensely active traveler, hiring a local guide and doing the serious, steep, route-pulling climb up Nevis Peak is an incredibly rewarding, exhausting challenge.
But we also promised the honest disappointments, the reality checks. What are the things that leave people feeling let down or feeling like they didn't get their money's worth?
We have to circle back to the core tension we opened with, the cost. Travelers who arrive holding on to a decades-old fantasy of bargain basement Caribbean prices feel a sharp, lingering disappointment the moment they see their first grocery receipt or restaurant bill.
The sticker shock is real. What about the physical environment?
The sand color is a major reality check. St. Kitts and Nevis are volcanic islands. The beaches are beautiful, but the sand is often a darker golden hue, and in some areas, it is distinctly dark gray or black volcanic sand.
Why is that a disappointment?
Because of Instagram. If a listener is expecting the blinding, powder white, flower-like sand and neon turquoise lagoon extremes of places like Turks and Caicos or the Bahamas, the darker, heavier sand of St. Kitts will be a visual letdown.
And Instagram doesn't show you the infrastructure struggles.
Exactly. The perfectly cropped photos don't show the cruise tide chaos overwhelming a beach bar on a Tuesday. They certainly don't convey the exhausting transport distances and the $65 taxi rides required to reach those picture-perfect beaches.
It's all about expectations.
People feel disappointed because they overpay for walk-up excursions on heavy ship days, they blindly order beachfront cocktails without checking the price, and they get financially trapped dining at remote luxury resorts when a simple car rental would have opened up incredible, authentic, cheaper local options. The islands deeply, richly reward planners, and they severely financially punish those who wing it.
So what if a listener has absorbed all of this, the complex logistics, the high food costs, the tidal crowds, the sand color, and they realize that St. Kitts Nevis just isn't the right fit for their specific vacation? What are the alternatives?
If you realize this isn't your perfect match, we have two excellent comparable alternatives in the region. Alternative one is Antigua.
Let's look at the mechanics of Antigua. Why is it a good pivot?
Antigua is a great pivot because it is a neighboring Eastern Caribbean island with a very similar upper mid to luxury demographic positioning. The baseline hotel costs are broadly similar, but Antigua wins dramatically on two specific fronts.
Richer.
First, the geology. It is a coral and limestone island, not purely volcanic. Therefore, it boasts exactly what St. Kitts lacks. Dozens and dozens of classic, brilliant white sand beaches.
And then second.
Second, the airlift. Antigua has a much larger airport with far more direct, nonstop flight routes from the US and the UK. That increased capacity means you can often save $100 or more per person on airfare, and you completely eliminate the exhaustion of connecting through a hub like Miami.
So the rule of thumb,
Mm-hmm.
if you're a beach collector who prioritizes easy, direct flights and classic white sand over everything else, pivot to Antigua. What's the second alternative?
St. Lucia. It offers remarkably similar, lush, mountainous, dramatic rainforest scenery. It targets that exact same couples, romance, and honeymoon market. The luxury costs are very similar. You will easily spend $300 to $600 plus a night. But St. Lucia operates on a much larger scale.
Meaning more options.
It offers a significantly wider range of resorts, from all-inclusives to boutique spots, and it features far more organized, highly structured, land-based adventure tourism.
So if you want the iconic dramatic scenery like the famous Pitton Mountains rising out of the sea, and you want highly structured adventure tours, pivot to St. Lucia. But bringing it back home, why would someone still consciously choose to stay with our featured destination? Why choose St. Kitts and Nevis over Antigua or St. Lucia?
You choose St. Kitts and Nevis for the specific magic of the two-island split. You choose it because you can have a bustling, history-filled day exploring the massive citadel of Brimstone Hill and riding the Sugar Railway on St. Kitts, and then take a 20-minute boat ride to immerse yourself in the incredibly uncommercialized, quiet, step-back-in-time serenity that you can genuinely still find on Nevis. It offers a very specific, deeply historic kind of calm variety that the other islands struggle to match.
All right, it is time for the final rundown, the Is It Worth It matrix. We're going to systemically grade this destination for each of our traveler personas out of 10, using the exact metrics from our audit. Let's start with the backpacker.
The backpacker gets a definitive 4 out of 10. The value simply isn't there. It is only worth it if you are a highly experienced, deeply flexible traveler who is totally comfortable basing yourself in an inland residential neighborhood away from the beach, relying heavily on the local minibus system, and cooking your own local produce.
The skip if here is the most crucial of the entire deep dive.
Absolutely. Skip it if your ceiling is under 120 a night in high season. There are no real social hostels, and the brutal transport costs to reach the coast will consume your savings. A much cheaper, far easier, and more rewarding budget trip exists almost anywhere else in the Caribbean or Central America.
Let's grade the mid-range traveler and the mid-range couple.
They get a solid 7 out of 10. It is absolutely worth it, provided you plan meticulously. You must book your flights and rooms 3 to 5 months ahead. You must target the shoulder season or thread the needle on a winter week with light cruise traffic. And you should smartly split your time between the convenience of Frigate Bay on St. Kitts and the historical quiet of Nevis. The key financial metric here is ensuring you have a realistic budget of $450 to $600 a day for the couple, all in.
And there's skip if.
Skip if you demand constant, cheap nightlife, or if you expect to find dozens of cheap, high-quality dining options within easy walking distance of your mid-range hotel. Next, the family.
What's their score?
The family also scores a 7 out of 10. It is highly worth it for families who place their highest value on a low-crime environment, a gentle, unhurried pace, and the self-contained convenience of massive on-site resort amenities like the Marriott. But you have to accept the math. A $3,000 to $5,000 on-the-ground cost for the week before you even buy the flights.
And skip if your kids need massive, dedicated water park resorts, or if you refuse to pay resort dining premiums. Now, the luxury traveler.
They score the highest, An 8 out of 10. It is highly worth it if your main goals are total aesthetic seclusion, top-tier anticipatory service, and you have the capital to embrace the isolation of the Park Hyatt or the Four Seasons. The key baseline number is 500 to 900 plus a night just for the room, plus an easy 150 to 300 daily for premium dining.
The big tactical tip for luxury: rent a car to break the captive pricing model of the peninsula. Finally, the digital nomad and the solo long-term traveler.
A 5 out of 10. It's a mixed bag. It's worth it if your main priority is finding a calm, safe, low-crowd base for a month to focus on deep work, provided you can secure a shoulder season apartment rental between $1,200 and $2,200. But skip it entirely if your remote work requires perfectly reliable, ultra-fast internet, or if you are looking for a vibrant young co-working and social scene. It is much quieter and significantly pricier than most traditional global nomad hubs.
So, synthesizing everything we've uncovered, the overall verdict: book carefully. St. Kitts Nevis is a destination that deeply, richly rewards the meticulous planner. It rewards the person who studies the cruise tides, who bases smartly across the two very different islands, and who understands exactly what their nightly budget ceiling actually buys them in this specific economy.
Yeah.
But it will absolutely ruthlessly punish anyone who wings it, expecting a cheap, effortless Caribbean holiday.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, as the Citizenship by Investment program continues to aggressively pull these islands, and others like them, upmarket, what does the future look like for authentic, accessible Caribbean travel? Are we witnessing the final days of the Midrange island escape, where eventually the only people who can afford the Caribbean are the ultra-wealthy and the cruise ship passengers passing through for 6 hours? It's something to think about before your next booking.
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.